Hey, we're back with the next episode in the series, part where we really connect Diagra and Common Core. If you haven't seen the first 3 episodes, I suggest you do that now. Frightening depth of this rabbit hole. There were a few of us who have decided to dig deeper into not just what and who, but why all of this happened. We decided there was value in researching those topics, which we have been told to stay away from on a constant and consistent basis. What we've been uncovering is, in all honesty, a bit frightening. Please bear with me. The rabbit hole is far deeper than we thought. 1. The beginning. In the beginning, Gamergate started in response to evidence of corruption in games journalism. This was far from a surprise to most of us, but we latched onto it because we finally had proof thanks to a certain jilted ex-boyfriend. What we found, however, was only the tip of the iceberg. Our effort to correct the problems for which we had evidence has led to a massive consumer revolt that gains greater traction and power with every passing week. It's also safe to say that none of us thought this would turn into such a major issue. The question some of us have been trying to answer is this: why did this turn into something so big? Why did multiple successful companies and individuals rush to defend a nobody? Why were they willing to place their professional well-being and their financial well-being of their business on the table in defense of some bloggers and indie game devs? The following is what we've started to uncover. 2. Why? Before we dive any deeper into details, it's important to develop some context for Gamergate. This was not an isolated situation, and it is not a recent occurrence. It began with the push to consider video games as art. Art, in this case, does not mean an objective appreciation for the beauty of games like BioShock Infinite or Skyrim. Art, in this case, refers more to modern art. The difference is that modern art focuses on subjective interpretation of what constitutes art and what doesn't. With this definition, nearly anything can be considered art because it is left to the viewer to decide whether or not the work has artistic value. This opened the door to a variety of hipster games such as Depression Quest, Gone Home, and a variety of others which many of us do not really consider games. The focus is not on fun, excitement, entertainment, or enjoyment, but the focus is instead placed on the merit of these games as a form of subjectively defined art. This push for games as art was an effort to redefine what a video game is. It was also quite successful. 3. Killing gamers. What really sparked the Gamergate revolution was not simply the fact that an indie game developer was trading favors in exchange for positive coverage. The real ignition came from the Gamers Are Dead articles, which popped up across a number of different sites within the span of a few days. They carried roughly the same wording and promoted the same message. The message was that gamers as a consumer market, which should be targeted by developers, is no longer relevant. Gamers, as we understand them, are dead. This begs the question: why were they so adamant in declaring our consumer market a $1 billion market dead? To answer this question, we're going to need to go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. 4. Common Core. If you're unfamiliar with the Common Core initiative, then you absolutely must dedicate some time to educating yourself. The space available in this article is far too small to explain it completely. The basic concept, however, is that Common Core is an effort to reform the educational system. The goal is to create a common and universal set of standards by which every student from K-12 and even college will be educated. Many people have already pointed out the problems with Common Core, but we don't need to focus on that yet. There are also many people who have been trying to convince us that Common Core is not an issue related to Gamergate and the consumer revolt as a whole. Here's why those people are wrong. Part of what Common Core education will consist of is greater emphasis on computers, information technology, new media, and, most importantly, using video games as an educational tool. There have, of course, always been educational games, but the difference here is that gaming technology will be a significant part of the in-school curriculum for Common Core students. They will, essentially, be as important to the classroom as textbooks and chalkboards. 5. The Gold Rush. To understand the next piece of the puzzle, you'll need to understand how tech startups work. Tech startups are usually founded not in an effort to fill a demand for an existing market, but to appeal to a predicted future market. Facebook, for example, was so successful not because it appealed to the demands of the online market at the time of its inception, but because it filled the demands of the emerging social media market. Tech startups are, in other words, speculative in the same way that an investor might buy shares of a company they feel will explode in popularity at a certain time in the near future. We have seen this gold rush before in online advertising, social media, marketing, and even mobile apps. With those markets currently saturated with companies trying to make a fortune, many new startups are looking towards the future. Many of them, that future is Common Core and its reliance on gaming and new media as an educational tool. It doesn't take much research to find a variety of different companies that are already producing educational tools and material that will appeal to Common Core should it be accepted by society as a whole. These companies are well funded, and there are a number of influential people involved in many of them. 6. Now that you understand there is a significant amount of money and influence behind the need to view video games as an educational tool, it should be quite easy to understand why gamers had to die. What those articles were attacking is not a consumer market, but the stereotypical view of the consumers within that market. While most video game enthusiasts can attest to the fact that the common gamer stereotype is not true, there's still a large majority of people within education, government, and business that don't know any better. Gamers are still seen as nerds. Worse yet, they're often seen as, quote, basement-dwelling, virgin, neck-bearded white men. Remember that one of the key points within the Gamers Are Dead articles was that companies should no longer worry about appealing to the stereotypical gamer and should stop worrying about what has traditionally been considered a video game. This goes back to the need to redefine the video game as a form of subjective art. What these articles really represent is a clear example of the need to push for a greater level of social acceptance in regards to gaming. These articles were an effort to attack the idea that gaming is for nerds and children because the destruction of that stereotype would help validate gaming as an educational resource. They attacked gamers personally because the backlash they expected from us would, in their theory, prove to companies and other organizations that what gamers want as a consumer market should no longer be a concern. This rabbit hole, however, does not stop here. 7. Required resources and studies. Before we could go any further down this path, it's important to take a step back and understand what these Gamers Are Dead articles really are. They were not designed to convince us, the self-identified gamers, nor was it an effort to convince companies like Rockstar that gamers are, in fact, dead as a consumer market. Remember, these articles were published by some of the biggest names in online gaming journalism. What these articles represent is not found in their content as much as it is found in their location. Being published on well-known websites gives them a certain credibility and authority. Having them posted on multiple sites further increases this power or perceived authority. As we know from the Milgram experiment, the perception of authority is often just as powerful as actual authority. This leads us to the next stop on our journey down this rabbit hole. 8. Don't look at DIGRA. The Digital Games Research Association, known as DIGRA, is yet another topic which we have been told to ignore and forget about. We have been told to give up research into things such as where they get their funding and who is involved with it. Fortunately, we don't need to know these details to understand how DIGRA comes into play. We only need to understand its purpose in the situation. DIGRA promotes the academic study and analysis of gaming. It came under fire by Gamergate after claims that it was being co-opted by radical extremists. This, however, is not exactly true, and the fact that this isn't true was used to discredit any research into the organization. The problem is that DIGRA does not need to be co-opted. It is fulfilling its purpose on a daily basis. That purpose is to create academic and scholarly papers regarding video games, the people who play them, and the entire social impact surrounding them. Once again, our question is, why are they doing this? To answer that, we need to go back to Common Core. In order to push Common Core into acceptance as the new standard for education, lobbyists are needed to convince different government organizations and key political figures in accepting the validity of Common Core's theories, as well as the proposed implementation of those theories. Part of that is, of course, the need to convince society that video games can be used as effective educational tools. The problem is that someone can't simply walk into Congress and try to convince politicians with a strong argument. They need studies, papers, and proof to reinforce and buttress the arguments they're making. This is where Digra comes into play. They are the source of these papers and studies used to help promote the validity of Common Core in general and its use of video games specifically. With this in mind, we found the first split in our trail. Digra produces material that can be used to validate the Common Core arguments on the political side, while things like Gamers Are Dead articles can be used to validate these arguments on the corporate and financial side. What we have here is a two-pronged strategy where policymakers can be persuaded with academic research, while business and finance can be persuaded with market-based arguments. Now that the puzzle is starting to come together, we can travel a bit deeper. Stay with me because this is about to get a little frightening. 9. Lifting the veil. At this point, we have a better perspective of what is actually going on. There is, however, a certain undeniable problem that remains. We know that all of these bloggers, indie game developers, and online celebrities are essentially not very important. They are pawns on the board, and while they may have connection within the gaming and online journalism industries, their connections do not seem to go very high up outside of possible personal and familial connections. So if we lift the veil and peer up to the higher levels of the pyramid, who do we find? Here's where it starts to get scary. Common Core is being promoted by a very specific set of people and organizations. As of today, it has a number of different influential and wealthy supporters. The first major supporter, however, is a name we all know well. This post, in fact, is being written on one of their programs. If you're thinking of Mr. Bill Gates, then you're exactly right. More specifically, it is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is, on the surface, a philanthropic organization that is arguably doing good for a lot of impoverished and suffering people. This true philanthropic work is not the problem. What we are concerned with is their focus on education. As Wikipedia itself states, a key aspect of the Gates Foundation's U.S. efforts involved an overhaul of the country's educational policies at both the K-12 and college levels. The foundation was the biggest early backer of the Common Core State Standards Initiative. It goes on to say, as part of its educational-related initiatives, the foundation has funded journalists, think tanks, lobbying organizations, and governments, including controversial groups such as the American Legislative Exchange Council. Millions of dollars of grants to news organizations have funded reporting on education and higher education, including more than $1.4 million to the Educational Writers Association to fund training for journalists who cover education. A major part of what this foundation does is fund journalists, think tanks, lobbying organizations, and even governments. They have spent millions in grants to news organizations and journalistic outlets. All of this has been done in an effort to promote their belief in Common Core. If you need to understand the power of influence this foundation has, particularly when it comes to funding whatever it likes, consider this. The foundation has an endowment of $42.3 billion as of the 24th of November 2014. If you've been following the Gamergate controversy, this information should be ringing a lot of bells for you. As frightening as this may be, the rabbit hole goes deeper still. 10. Messianic power. Bill Gates, as we all know, is a very wealthy and successful man. That wealth and success has given him tremendous amounts of influence not just in the USA but in the entire world. One perplexing issue, however, is the Christ-like power Bill and Melinda Gates seem to have. Recently, there were a number of stories about billionaires who are pledging to give a significant portion, often a majority of their wealth away once they die. The common thread running through all these stories is that they decided to do this after meeting with Bill and Melinda Gates. Keep in mind that we are not talking about a generous donation. We are talking about billionaires who have pledged to give away 50%, 75%, or more of their own fortune to help support, quote, the greater good. Here's a quote from just one article discussing the phenomenon. Billionaire Vedanta Resources founder Anil Agarwal has decided to donate the majority of his fortune to charity after meeting fellow billionaire and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. The 62-year-old Agarwal owns 70% of the London-based mining and energy company on the London Exchange, according to Bloomberg, and plans to give away 75% of his $3.3 billion personal fortune for the greater good of society. More importantly, quote, Agarwal said he made the decision after speaking with Gates and his wife Melinda. This, however, is only one isolated example. To truly see how these pieces of the puzzle fit together, you're going to have to tune in for the next part in this series. See you soon.